Okay. Thank you for that. I appreciate that. And like I said earlier, Anna Marie and I were so encouraged with our visit with you guys, and we look forward to our continuing partnership on the personal level, partnership in the gospel, really around the world. And I tell you what, I've got this it's really just a kid's beach ball, but it's the world. And you guys have a world perspective in a way that many don't. And not a day goes by when I'm up here looking out the window and I see some place that I know you all are working or living or have been living, and you don't come to mind. So I really appreciate the labor of love that you all put into your vocation.
Thank you, Jeff. Hey, one question I have about the spacewalk. Maybe you can just explain, do you get a little bit of time to just reflect out there or meditate or just enjoy the awesomeness of deep space?
We're pretty busy. It's an aggressive schedule out there. And I think, by the way, I think we'll go over maybe a couple minutes here. I think we'll have time to go over a couple minutes, but then we'll cut it off. But when you're doing a spacewalk, it's a pretty aggressive schedule typically, but there's always moments in the spacewalk when you are just waiting. You're waiting for the ground to make a decision. You're waiting for them to send some commands to systems when you're reconfiguring. For example, connecting up electrical cables, they have to be safe before we do that. So the ground sends some commands to save them. So there's moments like that, and it's an amazing, amazing time to actually stop what you're doing and not.
Hey, what's up, guys? Tyler here with Secure Team. We have some new and very strange. There's a lot of strange things happening in this particular piece of International Space Station live stream video. And this was actually originally posted and discovered by Scott Waring over at UFOsightingsdaily.com. So be sure to check out his website, and good on him. This was actually recorded, and you can go back and view these, on July 19th, 2016. And this was actually taken the day before the Dragon module was due to deliver cargo. So this has nothing to do with the Dragon module. And as you'll hear, which is also, this is very strange, you're hearing the astronaut speaking about God as these UFOs appear, which is kind of strange. I mean, it's not strange to understand that there are astronauts who may be religious, although I would think that it would be very uncommon due to the amount of training and scientific knowledge and basis that goes into becoming an astronaut. So it was a little strange to hear him speaking about the Bible. You hear him talking about the gospel, and his tone of voice, I noticed while he was talking about these things. I mean, you guys tell me if I'm wrong, but it seemed like I heard a little twinge of fear in his voice. Because again, it's very strange. I've never heard astronauts speaking live with ground control about religion, about God, about the Gospels. And, you know, when you start to hear science-educated men begin talking about the Gospels, you wonder if maybe they know something that we don't. But that's beside the point. Could be something, could be nothing. The strangeness starts, as you're seeing and as you saw, when we see a couple objects begin to appear over the Earth. The spacecraft is going around the backside of the Earth into the dark. So they're heading away from the sun. And we see this object begin to appear, and it appears almost as if the sunlight is catching it momentarily, illuminating it. And as the spacecraft heads behind the Earth and out of the view of the sun, the craft begins to disappear. And this UFO has some strange characteristics to it, because even when the ISS seems to be, at least in relation to where the UFO is, out of view of the sun, we see this almost sort of blue afterburn that appears on the UFO. At least that's what I would describe it as. I'm not saying that that's what it is. But nonetheless, it seems to almost glow in the dark once the object is out of view of the sun. And, of course, and I know before many of you post comments saying, no, Tyler, you're crazy. This was just a lens flare. Happens all the time. That may very well be true. This could have been a lens flare, and they do happen. But usually they happen when you're at certain angles, especially when you're in full view of the sun, and you tend to have a lot of them when they appear. Whereas here, we just have this one unidentified object. We don't see any other flares. We don't see any other distortions. And it's extremely smooth, the way it sort of fades out as the ISS is going behind the Earth. So the jury's out on whether this was a lens flare or a craft. It definitely has some strange characteristics. However, when I was reviewing this footage, something else caught my eye. Something that is without a doubt not a lens flare. And if you didn't catch it already, I will show you. I'll kind of loop back and forth, change speeds here. But as the ISS is moving out of view of the sun, there is a second object that looks to be in the shape of a disc or a ring. It looks like it has a metallic or at least a slightly shiny surface structure. And when the sun hits this thing momentarily, just as they're going out of view of the sun, you will see the sunlight reflect off of, again, what looks like a ring or a saucer sitting in the dark. And I know a lot of you eagle eyes out there may have already seen it, but we'll go ahead and zoom in right here and we'll circle it for you. But look as the ISS is moving out of view of the sun, and you see the sunlight reflect and kind of circle around this thing. That's why I said it kind of looks like a ring, because we don't see any reflection on anything in the middle. We only see a reflection sort of wrapping around the outside of this thing as the sun hits it. And this, in my opinion, is much more interesting than the glowing object, which does have characteristics of a possible lens flare. No, this object, which seems to be just sitting there in the darkness of space, and like any other normal hard object, only appears in the darkness of space when the sunlight reflects off of it, which is exactly what has happened right here. And look at this thing as we kind of go back and forth, as I rewind it and then fast forward, and you can see the sunlight reflecting off of this object that's sitting outside of the ISS. Now, we don't have a distance of where this thing is. This thing could be very far away, but large, or it could be much smaller, but closer to the ISS. We don't know, but what we do know, and as you're seeing here, it does have a ring shape to it, and the sun does reflect off of it before the object goes completely out of view of the sun and we no longer see it, and it disappears back into the darkness. So it's almost like, hey, we may have caught a lens flare, and that may or may not have made for such an interesting video, but then we catch this other thing that's seemingly hiding in the darkness, which again, we've talked about a lot of times. A lot of these UFOs we see, and in my opinion are the more legitimate UFO sightings, are the objects that don't emit light. They don't have lights on them. They do not broadcast themselves, but they are out there, and we have caught them sitting out there in space, and the only time they will become visible is usually when the sun reflects off of them for a split second, as seen here. So I think we definitely have a bona fide object sitting out there. The sun reflects off of it. You can see the reflection of the sun sort of wrap around this ring-shaped UFO. And yeah, I think it's an awesome catch. Let me know what you guys think. Now, I know a lot of you out there may say, Tyler, you're crazy. There's no UFOs out there. Now, if you are saying that, chances are you're new to the channel and you haven't seen the mountain of evidence that I've posted via this channel over the years, especially that of International Space Station footage, but not only that, STS mission footage. And I'll show you some more clips proving to you that there are objects out there that are changing speed and direction of their own volition and are out there as we speak. One of my favorite clips you're seeing here, which is from the STS-48 mission, which happened in 1991, where we will see multiple objects moving. You can see the Earth. I'm not sure if this is filmed in thermal or infrared, but nonetheless, we see multiple objects sitting here, and I want you to look toward the horizon line of the Earth, and you will begin to see a UFO crossing over, and then very rapidly and suddenly change direction, make a hard right turn, and fly off into space. Now, let's rewind this and fast forward it a few times just to give you a little idea here, and I want you to pay attention to the other objects in this video that stand completely still when this one object turns, and there's actually a couple objects in the distance that seem to move with this object, that seem to also turn and fly away. I'm counting 2. But again, you'll notice there are plenty of other objects sitting here that do not move at all. It's just this lone object that's just flying over the Earth, comes into frame, and then boom, out of there, flying at a high rate of speed out into space. Now here is a clip from a later part of that mission, captured at a later time directly after this was taken, showing another object coming into view and once again making a sudden, sharp left-hand turn and flying out towards space. So check this out. Once again, another sharp turn. Objects are moving, making turns, and they're gone. Now, I'm going to do you one better and show you an even more explosive piece of STS footage, this time captured in 2005 on the STS-114 mission, where you will see an object come into frame over the Earth. It flies over to the left of the screen, stops dead in its tracks, and begins to move backwards into its own footprint, back toward the right, and out of frame. Now, as you just saw, and as I'm looking at this again, let me make a correction here. This thing doesn't stop. This thing is actually maneuvering. It's actually flying into view and does a complete turn. It completely arcs and turns and goes the opposite way, which even further proves that this object is flying and turning, making these tight turns on its own volition. There is no outside force. In fact, to the contrary, this object is obviously turning on a force coming within itself. And you watch this thing, watch it over and over until it's ingrained in your brain, and give me an explanation for it. Space debris does not do this. Space debris does not fly in one direction and then suddenly make a 180-degree turn, curve around, and fly the opposite way at an increased speed. So these things are up there, people. And nothing anyone will say will convince me otherwise, because I've seen all the evidence and I continue to see the evidence come in. I've seen NASA cut the feed. I've seen them get caught in lies. I've heard the testimony from astronauts and former military personnel talking about the existence of these things. I've heard the testimony from Canada's former Minister of Defense, wherein which he directly stated that not only are governments covering up the truth that aliens exist, but that there are numerous alien species that have been visiting our planet since the beginning of time. And I'm talking, of course, about the former Canadian Minister of Defense, Paul Hellyer, who came out to the media, just like many other former and ex-military officials, former NASA employees, former military officers, and scientists, who have come forward. And like them, Mr. Hellyer has contributed to the whistleblowing, and who is a well-respected military man, whose information has been backed up by declassified documents, as well as an array of high-ranking military leaders who have also gone on record. So if you haven't heard of Mr. Hellyer, look him up. Ex-Canadian Minister of Defense. The truth is out there. You just got to look for it. So, again, very interesting times. Let me know what you think about this new ISS footage, and what was the deal with this astronaut speaking on the gospel? And was this a reaction to some information that the astronaut knew? And let me know what you guys think of this ring-shaped object that the light is reflecting outside of the ISS. Very, very interesting. So again, if you have your own footage, shoot it over to me. All of my contact info is down in the video description. And be sure to share, like, and subscribe on your way out. And stay tuned because I've got a lot more coming.